podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you in cooperation with the SJ Network. If you're a person who'd like to appear on a podcast, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
How is your career going as a professional rock climber?
It's going great, so far. I'm also taking a course on becoming a mattress maker.
Why would you need to do that?
So I have something to fall back on.
Speaking of wisdom, let's have a listen to the Sherpa's interviews with podcasters from the Wisdom app. Too Many Podcasts proudly presents The Wisdom Files, Volume 1.
Attention, rebels of the Sherpalution. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. We would like to give you a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial simply by heading to www.audibletrial.com/Sherpa. There are over 180,000 titles of audiobooks and podcasts, including this one, to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. And now, the one and only Mr. Bruce will lead you into the Sherpa Chalet. As a reminder, next week, the Sherpa Chalet will be celebrating Elvis Presley Week. We are currently accepting reservations for travelers who love meat, tender.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the podcast Sherpa.
Hello there, rebels of the Sherpalution. Welcome to Too Many Podcasts. It is the podcast about podcasts and so much more. I am your guide through this mountain we call Podcastia, so lovingly. Jim the Podcast Sherpa, right here, coming to you from the Sherpalu studios high atop the mountain. And this week's episode, it's going to be a little bit different. You know, I've been a proud member of an app called Wisdom, and it's absolutely free that you can download for your phone or your tablet. And it has a lot of speakers, and you can get so much influence and inspiration from this app. A lot of great speakers. I've met so many wonderful and incredible people on this app. And it's all sorts of things going on here, depending on what type of speaking you like to hear. You can hear motivational speakers. You can hear religious sermons. You can hear books being read. Or you can even listen to this little podcaster talking about podcasting and podcasts. Yep, I'm there. And that's what this episode is going to be about. It's a few of the people who've popped in my room while I was doing my talks about podcasts and podcasting. And coincidentally, these three gentlemen all have podcasts. So I'll give you a little bit of information on each one. And you'll hear a nice little brief interview, maybe about 9 or 10 minutes each. And after that's all done, we are going to head back over, it's been a while, to Sherpa Samples. So let's get started right away with my first talk with a guy named Frankie J. Frankie J has several podcasts, one called The Frankie J Experience and one called Frankie J Raw. He's from upstate New York, and we've actually gotten the opportunity to speak several times on Wisdom, and each time, always an enjoyable conversation with the gentleman. He's in upstate New York, and I remember he had first told me unfortunate circumstances kept him from being able to work, and then he got into podcasting, and now he's taken off and building it up, and we're really proud of him, and you should definitely check out his podcast. So let's listen to the first interview with me and Frankie J of the Frankie J Experience. Oh, we have a new guest, and Frankie J, who has actually hopped on here before, is joining us, and I know Frankie has got a podcast.
Hey, Jim.
Hello there. How you doing?
What's poppin'? We haven't talked in quite some time.
I know. It's been a little while. You keeping busy?
Yeah. I've actually, if you look at my logo there, I been working real hard on my new concept, Frankie J Raw. What it is I took the word, added a W, and I turned it into ready, able, willing, whenever to talk about any topic.
Very cool, because it was originally the Frankie J Experience,
yeah,
right?
Well, it's part of the Frankie J Experience. So the whole idea behind the Frankie J Experience was to be able to, take it into different directions and put it under one tent. So, Frankie J Raw is just going to be part of the Frankie J Experience. So that's what I'm kind of trying to build my brand around. And we were talking a little before, if I recall correctly, about, the type of podcasting and, what people look for, how long they listen, what days they listen, things along those lines. So I noticed your title here was, we're talking podcasting. So I hopped on the mic.
From one of our conversations a while back, I actually took your advice. So I want to say thank you. When you said about sometimes when you're talking about something that's coming up in the show to not just give all that information away, but just kind of give them some information that will draw the listener in to want to listen a little bit longer. I've been trying to do that when I do my shows now.
Oh, great. Yeah. Like in the beginning, in your intro, instead of giving them all the topic lines and what's going to be in the show right away, or instead of doing that, saying, we got guest, Frankie J and much, much more. So stick around till the end and catch all of it. That kind of thing, right? Awesome, man. How's it been working out?
I think it's helped. It's funny when I listen to it, I'm like, yeah, he definitely has something here because it also kind of makes it sound like a more polished show as well.
Good word. I like that word, polished. You know what I do, and I know this is going to sound like most people say, "Oh, you're plagiarizing it," and I'm really not. I'll watch all these different talk shows during the day, the late night shows, and I'll just sit there and I'll listen and I'll take notes on, like, for example, late night shows. They'll come out and they'll take about 2 minutes. They'll tell some jokes, get the audience warmed up, essentially. And what I found was when I was on the Dr. Phil virtual audience all those times, before the show even started, they had a gentleman come out who was basically the audience warm-up comedian. So what he would do is come out and give the audience instructions on how the show goes and what the expectations are from the audience. But he would do it in a really fun, comical sort of way to draw them in. And just, I literally just sit there and I take notes, and I try to take those notes and implement them into what I'm doing on my podcast. And when I'm doing interview shows or panel shows, I, have written down in note form, bullet point, if you want to call it that, on how I'm going to facilitate the show and how I'm going to moderate the room. And it's amazing how it works. And like you said, when you re-listen to it later on, it does sound polished, and it's like, yes, I succeeded. Woo! I pulled it off. So yeah, I know. I figured I'd pop in, check in, and see how you're doing and what's up and what's new. And I won't take up the whole time here. I just I don't want to hijack the room. I'm not that guy, but
No.
Yeah.
Cool.
Well, I had a guy the other day on another platform get so heated that I didn't want to let him up because of what he does as a living and the topic that I was talking about. I didn't want it to go south because I was talking about a topic that he wanted to, as a lawyer, he's a lawyer, add legal advice and bring the legal talk into it, and that's not what it was about at all. And he's known for hijacking shows. So I ignored his request to come up, and I left him out of the show because you don't have to invite everybody up and accept everybody's request. It's your show. And he got to the point where he threw a temper tantrum. I mean, this guy was blowing me up on instant messenger from Instagram after the show, blowing me up that I did not let him up to provide legal advice. And I wrote him back. I go, that wasn't the sort of show I was doing. And he was saying, well, everything you were saying was wrong, and you could get sued for what you were saying, and this and that and the other thing. And I wrote back, well, that's my problem, not yours. Mind your own business.
Absolutely. If I want to hire somebody, you won't.
And I go, and if I wanted you to come up and share legal advice, I would have gone ahead and said, okay, for you to come up. But I go, I've heard you before, and you're one that likes to come up and hijack people's shows and take over the stage and let the person who's running the room know that you're in charge. And I'm like, it's my show, not yours. I had my show organized. I had it planned out. I had my panel of participants assembled, and it was discussed prior that we were going to do the show, and we weren't going to allow guests up, not even any guest. It was just going to be a panel of discussion, like the View, for example. I don't like that show, but like that sort of show. And on those shows, they're not, inviting audience members up. They're giving their view. They're talking about the topic, and that's the show. I just wanted to kind of give that example too, that you don't have to let everybody up. And some of these people that do these shows on here feel if someone requests to talk that they have to let them up, and they don't. They don't. It's your show.
Right, and I think which one's worse, you can always give them the boot.
Oh,
anyway,
yeah.
right? Don't you have that ability
I've had to do that? I've had to do that. I've had to report people. And, because people get mad if you don't give them the attention or if you don't follow them back or whatever. It's like, wow, man. It's a free world. Like, if I don't want to invite you, if I see you walking by and you're walking down the street with a handgun and a knife, it doesn't mean I have to invite you into my house. Like, I don't have to. But people have this like self-entitlement, or they feel that if you don't invite them, that you're the meanest person on the block. And it's like, well, go down 10 doors and see if they let you in. Probably they won't. But it's funny how that works out. And I just wanted to check in, see how you were doing, how your show was going in, and I'm glad to hear that some of my advice helped you out a little bit. And I'm glad to share with people, and I don't know everything. I'm still learning, Jim. I'm on the journey that you're on, and if I can share advice that will help somebody succeed, that makes me feel good. And I'm not, I'm not in a competition, and that's where I think a lot of people get misconstrued. I want to be part of a community and help the community around me build, because if that community around me succeeds, that's going to help me succeed. And that's why I like to.
Absolutely. Very well
what's
put.
that?
I said very well put.
And it's just, I like to use analogies. Obviously, you can probably tell. But, if I'm planting a lot of trees in my front yard and all my neighbors have, weeds and there's no trees, and I have some extra trees and shrubs that I purchased that I don't have room for, I'm going to share them with my neighbors and help them start their lawns and get their yards going. It's about sharing, caring, and, building one community. And everybody can have a different show, a different style show, but it doesn't mean that we have to stomp on each other to get to the top of the mountain, because that it doesn't help you. And what I've also noticed is if I jump in on other people's talks and I participate, that by default is going to help you grow an audience a little bit more, and it'll help me as well. So it's it's giving and taking, and it's doing it in a very respectful way with dignity and respect. So I like sharing, and it's not to say, oh, well, I know this and you don't. It's not like that. It's just sharing tips that I've learned from other people and spreading awareness on things I've learned.
Well, that is Frankie J, and he has a podcast called The Frankie J Experience, and he's been doing Frankie J Raw, which is his new endeavor. You get to talk to different people. He's a super nice guy. He's from upstate New York, I believe. And he's popped in here lots of times, and he's fun to talk to about podcasting. He's got a really great thing going here, and he's kind of in the same boat as I am, that we kind of created our own thing and we want it to grow, and he's really doing well with it. So I like when he swings by. He's a really cool guy.
Now my next guest is a guy named Jesse Stewart, and Jesse's from West Virginia, and he hosts a podcast called Progressive HVAC. Now you're saying, what? Somebody has a podcast about HVAC systems? Yep, that's absolutely right. Now, when you hear Jesse start talking to me, and you'll get a feel for the kind of guy that he is, and you can see that a podcast about HVAC is quite enjoyable listening to him, and he's actually done a lot of instruction, and he's pretty well seated in the HVAC business, and he made quite a name for himself, and I really enjoyed talking to him. He had me laughing through a good portion of our little conversation. So, up next, it's Jesse Stewart of Progressive HVAC.
Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Jesse Stewart. Hi, Jesse.
Hi, Jim. Nice to meet you.
Okay, I'm going to guess where you're from. Would that be all right?
Oh, yeah. No, I love this game.
I'm going to say Brooklyn. No.
I'll tell you what. Let me throw you off before you guess.
Okay.
All right. So if I spoke to you like this, would you believe that I was from somewhere else instead of where you're going to say?
Well, being like Jesse Stewart, that would be very natural, sir.
Yeah, it's really befitting, really, if you think about it. So you got Stewart, and Stewart's obviously either Scotch-Irish, depending on what you want.
So I want to say like Oklahoma.
Nope. I'm actually on the east side of the country.
Okay. South Carolina?
West Virginia.
West Virginia. Oh, wow. I was due south.
Now, trust me, man, I get it a lot. Even in my own state, because there's a northern and a south portion there, and you'll go up to the northern portion closer to like Maryland and Pittsburgh, places like that. And you'll hear me talk to people go, "Oh my God, I love your accent. Where are you from?" It's like same state as you. I'm just in the southern portion.
I'm checking out your information here. I love like the idea of unique podcasts, and I have never seen anyone with an HVAC podcast.
There are actually quite a few. There's really a handful that made it to really draw the attention of others. A lot of guys give it a shot, and just like you said, they kind of get burnt out after a few weeks because they ain't got this huge following. And it's kind of like you said before, that's just how it goes. You've got to put the time in, and you got to find out what people want to hear, how to keep them entertained, especially when you're trying to teach them.
Yeah,
So,
that's obviously a very technical field too.
Oh, it's extremely technical. And my podcast is one of the only podcasts about HVAC that talks about all facets in the trade. That's everything from the service side to controls to sales, distribution, the whole kit caboodle. And my personal favorite and the real kicker behind the whole name is progressive. It's about being a progressive thinker within the trade. I'm a firm believer that no matter what your career path is, you decide how much you get paid, you decide how much you're worth, and you pave your own path. There's no set time frame for anything, really. It's just how much you want to put into it.
And this is your own business, or do you work for a company?
I do work for a company. I work for a commercial HVAC contractor in West Virginia. I'm their training director. So I train all new employees, and also I teach at a local community and technical college.
Oh, wow. That is your lifeblood.
Yeah. And ironically enough, I was actually approached by Wisdom. I didn't even know what Wisdom was. And they're like, "Hey, we would love to have you on here. We don't really have anyone with your kind of a background. If you wouldn't care, just go ahead and create an account." And I was like, "Sure, I'll check it out." And for the longest time, I mean, I wasn't very impressed with what I was listening to. And it kind of got better as time went on. But when I seen yours, I was like, okay, this is something I'm interested in. I'm going to try and jump in, kind of give my input.
How long have you been doing your podcast, Jesse?
I launched my podcast in, I think it was May of last year. And I believe you use Anchor as well, correct?
Yes, okay, I do.
So I use Anchor as well. And I took a pause for a period of time. I think it was like 4 months because, of course, they have sponsorships and everything they provide you, and they're supposed to give you an ad to record, et cetera, et cetera. And they never sent it. And my podcast kept growing. I was like, now, wait a minute. And I said, this is a hobby, but, if you want me to keep putting out on here, then let's talk money a little bit. And
right. Yeah, they're not great with sponsors.
No, they're not great. I love their RSS though. I mean, it's this most pain-free distribution system I've ever seen. Now, I will say, I don't know what you use for your editing software, but I'm sure you're a huge fan of filler words, just like I am.
I edit a lot of it out.
Yeah. When I started, I used what is the free one? Audacity.
Yes, I did. Yeah, that's the one I use.
I'm telling you right now, because I didn't want to invest money into something that wasn't going to bring money back to me. And but I did one podcast interview with more filler words than I think is in an Urban Dictionary, and it drove me mad. I literally almost stopped because of it. We're talking like 4 hours of editing an hour and a half episode. And I actually came across a company called Descript. They reached out to me. They said, "Hey, we see that you're a new podcast. Try us out for free. Let us know what you think, and then go with us from there if you're interested." That thing is awesome.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah.
Yeah, that thing is freaking awesome. It makes a Word document of your podcast, and you can just edit the Word doc, and it edits the voice for you. It's amazing. And no, I'm not. I'm not sponsored by Descript. Nothing like that.
Yeah, no, they email me every once in a while, Jesse, so I know exactly what you're talking about.
Man, I'm telling you, I dig it. I don't know how much time you spend editing, but me personally, if I can get it done faster, I'm all for it.
That's always a plus. I was going to say, I was just speaking earlier, I think probably before you popped in, about how sometimes people have their very specific topics in their podcasts, and their passion is so evident for it. So I think that's, I mean, without even having heard an episode of your podcast and just hearing you talk, I can already sense that in your show.
I have a true passion for my trade. I do. And I have an even bigger passion for personal development. I love to see people grow and succeed, no matter what their career choice is. Now, of course, obviously, I want to try and pull you to my side, say, hey, come work with your hands a little bit and then see where you go from there. Because a fun fact for me is my total time in the trade is just a little over 5 years. And I went from an apprentice to service tech to a manager in that time frame. I also had no social life whatsoever, but I'm a firm believer in working hard while you're young and then getting to take it a little easier when you're a little older.
Nothing wrong with that.
Oh, no, I thoroughly look forward to it, but I don't think I can take it easy till I'm at least in my mid 40s. But no, I'm extremely passionate about it.
Yeah. Did you ever think of doing your own business or anything like that? Or you seem like you got a head for it.
Yeah. So right now my podcast is actually listed as an LLC. And the reason for that is because I actually do market and sell HVAC training. Like I will come and do live webinars. I'll come do hands-on training. I've traveled out of state. And people are just blown away by the amount of time I've got in this and the stuff that I do know. And so that really kind of helped build a reputation for me. In addition to that we have a newspaper, I guess you could call it. It's more like a magazine, but it's called ACHR The News, which is air conditioning, heating, and refrigeration. It's a contractor magazine, and they select 40 people every year across the country that are under the age of 40, and they put them in the thing called the 40 under 40. And it is a huge honor, and I was blessed enough to actually receive that honor this year. And oh man, I'm telling you, it's like the highlight of my career so far.
I like it, man. It sounds like nowhere to go but up from here. Listen, they're going to kick you off in a minute, so I was wondering if you could kind of do a quick promo for your podcast to let people know where they can hear it.
Yeah. So my podcast is Progressive HVAC. You can find it anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, literally anywhere. We've also got a website. You can check it out at progressivehvacpodcast.com. And we also are on all social media apps, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all that. So like I said, be sure to check us out if you're interested. And if nothing else, just check out the trade, see if you find anything you want to learn.
There you go. I like it. All right. Since we got 20 seconds, could you do the Scottish voice again, please?
All right. So I'll do the Scottish voice since Jim liked it so much, just for entertainment purposes only. And for those of you who are listening, don't be shy. Be sure you jump in here and actually talk with Jim. He's fantastic.
And our last guest is a guy named Chris. And he has a podcast called Interstellar Frequency. It's about divine intervention. See, really unique podcasts going on here, Rebels. See, I like that kind of stuff. And I got to get to know Chris, and he had some questions about this Sherpa Samples, which is what we do right here, coming up next. And he talked about his podcast as well, and another enjoyable conversation. And I might add that, it's not just men doing these. There are plenty of amazing women on here as well. And when I do this again, I definitely want to find some more women to feature, and I do have them on my recorded episodes. I've done well over 50, so I couldn't go over every single one, but we will probably do a volume 2, I'm sure, in the near future. And I encourage you to download the Wisdom app if you can. Even if you don't want to be a speaker, you can just listen to some of these amazing people and what they have to say. It's really enjoyable.
Hey, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
How's it going? I can hear you loud and clear.
All right. I was intrigued on what you were talking about with the podcast.
Okay. And I think that you have one.
Yeah, I was intrigued about the podcast and how you were checking out different podcasts that were passionate and stuff like that. It's the first time hearing somebody actually talk about, like an actual podcast or just podcasting, period. And so I was kind of curious about your perception of what you experience or what you see out there as other podcasters and stuff like that, because I've noticed a lot of them are just like straight up talks, and there's not really much catharsis or, I guess there's different stuff, but I've tried to search some, but I haven't been able to find anything that actually kind of moves you. You get what I'm saying?
You like hearing stuff by like motivational speakers and stuff like that?
Well, I mean, like storytelling. You remember the old days back in the day when they used to do the radio storytelling about a story, and they do the voices and stuff like that, right?
Sure.
It's like today, it seems like now podcasters are just jumping on and just doing it just because everybody else is doing it, and like they're gabbing like they're having a conversation like we're doing now and putting it out there, and it's like, wait, what? Like they're not putting efforts into it.
Okay. So do you like scary stories, or do you like a kind of like a radio drama type of deal?
No, I mean, I was just curious on what you know about what's out there, because I really don't search the podcasts. I've gone through a couple of them that seem interesting, that are kind of neat.
Okay.
And I haven't really dove into other people's work because of doing my own work. It's very time consuming.
Sure. Okay.
So I was curious if you actually did that.
Okay. Yeah. Well, actually, what I do on my show is called Sherpa Samples, and I will check the podcast charts, and I will sample like an episode from somebody's show. And you have to kind of keep in mind that sometimes if it's a serialized thing, and I'm listening to episode number 4, I can't really tell you a lot about the story, because it's just that's going to be the only one I'm listening to. But I can get a feel about what the story is about, and if it's really well done. Sometimes, like with the serialized ones, I will listen to like the first chapter, and very often that kind of sets it up for you. There are the serialized ones, and there are the ones where a lot of them are interviews, and that's probably the easiest, I guess, for podcasters, because if you're on my show, I interview you. People get to know you. You can promote your podcast, and then when you do your show, you can say, "Hey, I was on too many podcasts." So it's a mutual thing for exposure, and that's what a lot of people end up shooting for.
Oh, okay, all right. So you're more of like a reviewer, basically.
Well, I'm not really a reviewer. I really just kind of make people aware of podcasts. That's an interesting question, Chris, because I'll actually say, I don't feel that I'm qualified to judge a podcast. I mean, I will say, hey, I really like this, but I'm not really going to go beyond that, because, everybody's going to like what they like. And like, you mentioned the word passion before. If I was a big sports fan, I might be big on
passionate about sports.
Right. And I'm going to love all the sports podcasts, but somebody who's not big on sports are going to be like, okay, they're just talking about people that I don't know, and they're talking about statistics I don't care about. It's what grabs your interest.
Right. I was just kind of curious, like what is your show about? I was driving, so I couldn't really look and do research while I was. So I figured it would just be easier just to talk to you in person instead of actually looking at the phone.
Too Many Podcasts is the podcast about podcasts, and I do have podcasters on my show, and basically what I was describing to you, really, we get to know the podcaster, we get to know what they listen to, why they created the shows. A lot of them have very interesting stories as to how they came about to do it. They talk about the shows that they like to listen to, and as I said, I recommend shows as well. And there are episodes when I don't have podcasters on, but I'll have creators on, like actors and directors and musicians and authors and stuff like that, to talk about their work, just to kind of break things up. I work with a guy who's a publicist, and he knows a lot of people, and he has clients too that he's trying to get promoted. So he'll give me a yell and say, "Hey, Jim, you want to put this guy in your show?" And I'm like, "Yeah, why not?" And he's also sent some celebrities my way and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a good deal.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I didn't want to take up too much of your time. I was just kind of curious what you were talking about and stuff like that. So.
Oh, okay. Well, look. Well, I got you here. Why don't you talk a little bit about your podcast?
Oh, kind of embarrassed a little bit.
I'll twist your arm.
Put me on a spot like that. Come on. Actually, the real truth is I just got home from work, and I got to actually go in and say hi to the family and say, "Hey, what's going on?" And meanwhile, I was driving home. I caught your stuff, and I just wanted to say, "Oh, okay. What about this? What about that?" That was all.
Yeah, no, I like the premise of your podcast, though, about divine intervention. I've got a soft spot for a very unique podcast, and I find a lot of them on here. I spoke to a guy who's in West Virginia, and he does an HVAC podcast, and he talks about like the work and all that stuff, and it's like a masterclass for people who want to get into that field. And this guy is like very charismatic. And I was thinking, like, wow, who would think to make a podcast about this? And this guy was great. And I mean, your topic is very unique too. Do you do like a lot of your own stories, or you have people on telling their stories?
Yeah, most of all, mine is all about my experiences and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Most of everything I do is mostly because my children are, we're in the digital world today. And I'm kind of almost doing a autobiography of who Dad is and what Dad's experienced. So that way, when they get older, they're going to be able to go back and look at this and go, "Oh, okay," and maybe learn something from it. Time frame now.
That's a very interesting point.
It's different. Like when we were kids, we turned around and we had to smack the.
It's interesting because I think a lot of people forget after a while. Especially when you do a lot of. Yeah. When you do a lot, you're really leaving like a digital legacy to people, whether it's your fans or your family or whatever. They're hearing your voice and they're hearing your stories.
Right. And it's something that they're stuck in the computer all the time. They don't get to go outside and play like they do, but they choose not to. They would rather sit there and watch kids play, which is really bizarre to me. It's like, what? What? Okay. I mean, whatever. It's a different world today than it was back then. So
that it is.
That's kind of what I'm doing, and then trying to bring the catharsis of making the person hear my stuff and experience what I'm talking about. That's my end goal and result.
You want to give a quick plug before your time runs out, Chris? Oops, I think I might have lost him. Okay, well, I'll do it then. So that was Chris, and Interstellar Frequency is the name of his podcast. And it's a podcast about divine intervention. I like that. See, everybody comes on here and they've got these cool ideas, and I just feel so inadequate sometimes. I'll be better. I promised myself I wouldn't cry.
We're on that internet thingy at Sherpalution.com.
And now it's time for Sherpa Samples. If you've got a podcast you'd like us to mention, just message us and you'll get your name mentioned on the show.
Yes, I know, Rebels, it's been a while, but let's talk a little bit about Sherpa Samples. I checked out a whole bunch of podcasts, and there's a backlog of them waiting for me on my phone for me to talk to you about them. So let's get some off the phone right now and give you a little sample. So there is a game show, I guess it's in Britain on Channel 4 of the BBC, called Taskmaster. And I guess it's involving comedians. And there is a podcast called Taskmaster-The Podcast, which is hosted by Ed Gamble. Now, if that name sounds familiar, he was also one of the hosts of the podcast Off Menu. And basically, it's a discussion of the game show. I've never seen it, so I really can't tell you what's going on. It looks like they have comedians doing unusual things. and then they discuss that, and then they earn points. And I didn't really even know the comedians that they were talking about, so it's kind of hard for me to be objective and give you a better description about that. And there was also the Glass Cannon, and it's a licensed play podcast, role-playing. And I know there's a whole bunch of episodes of that. So if you're into that kind of stuff, like along the Dungeons and Dragons types of stuff, this is a podcast that you might want to check out. All In was something that I really enjoyed. It's 4 buddies who are experts in various fields, and they talk about a lot of different topics. They're poker buddies and they're professional gamblers, but they don't just talk about gambling. They talk about technology, science, the news, politics, what have you. And 4 really intelligent guys. You definitely want to check that podcast out. I really enjoyed that. Matt and Shane's Secret Podcast is 2 guys who were comics, and it's a lot of silliness between the 2 of them. Humor is a little bit crude on this if you enjoy crude humor, but hey, if that's your thing, then check it out. And Sold a Story was something that I've actually listened to all the episodes on, and it has to do with teaching children how to read in the schools. And it was really a big expose on the techniques used to teach the children. I thought it was really interesting. Definitely a interesting change of pace for a miniseries podcast. Myths and Legends is hosted by Jason and Carissa Weiser. And they talk about, myths and legends. Some of the famous people that we know through some of the stories. In the episode that I checked out, they talked about Hans Christian Andersen, and they did some of the stories that he wrote, and they discussed those. Quiet Part Loud was something that I listened to on Spotify. It was exclusive on Spotify. And it's another scripted drama, and it has to do with 9/11 and a radio host. And it's really intriguing. I only have to listen to one episode, unfortunately, but it looked like there was definitely a lot going on. And I know with some of these scripted dramas, especially the ones that they like to do on Spotify, they really drag the listener in. So if you want to check that out, quite suspenseful, Rebels, quite suspenseful. Also, I listened to Murder and Magnolias, and this is a Dateline podcast, true crime, of course, and it is about a marriage that broke up and turned into a murder-for-hire plot. Very intriguing stuff. I pretty much listened to the whole thing. I liked it. I enjoyed it. Keith Morrison always does a great job. He's got that deep voice. Oh, yes. I can't do it. Sorry. If my voice was a little bit better, I'd probably be able to do that. So now I got a little bit of a surprise for you, I guess. If you know when I talk about podcasts, there aren't many sports podcasts that I can recommend, because I really don't follow sports, and it's hard to be objective. But I got to tell you, there were 2 that I stumbled across that I really liked. The first one was called After the Whistle, and this came out around the time of the World Cup, which is now over, I believe. And it was hosted by Brendan Hunt, who was one of the stars of the Apple TV show Ted Lasso, which was about a soccer player, and Rebecca Law, who's actually a commentator for soccer in the United States. And she's actually a Brit, and he's from the United States, living in Britain. And they had some really interesting discussions about soccer, and they expressed their thoughts on the World Cup from week to week. And they do a really good job. And they're not too afraid to debate each other and have a little fun in the meantime. And finally, this was a real surprise, folks. This one's called New Heights, and it's hosted by Jason and Travis Kelce. And they are brothers who are professional football players. Jason is on the Philadelphia Eagles, and Travis is on the Kansas City Chiefs. Now, if you are in the United States or you like watching American football, these 2 teams are facing against each other in the Super Bowl. And the 2 brothers will be opposing each other, which I thought is really interesting. Probably one of the few times that this has happened in NFL history. So I really like this podcast. They're a lot of fun. They're engaging. They really give a lot of insight from the point of view of professional football players. And these guys know their stuff. So if you're not too heavily into football or you like football a lot, I think either way, you're going to enjoy their podcast. I guess we're probably going to have to wait around until next season, not unless they're doing something during the summer. I'm not sure. But, guys, I enjoyed it. Even though you two very large men who could hurt me, that has nothing to do with my review of this podcast. Good job, gentlemen. And check out any of these podcasts, depending on what your tastes are. And if you've got a podcast to recommend, you know what to do. Just email me at jimthepodcastsherpa@gmail.com. Use the subject line Sherpa Samples. And if it's a podcast that I haven't checked out yet, even if it's one of your own, I will gladly check it out for you and talk about it on the show. Your name will get mentioned in that episode. I promise you. It's that easy. Or you can even message me on social media. Sherpalution, of course, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And now that we know that much, let's head into the outro. A very special thanks to Frankie J, Jason Stewart, and Chris. And check out all their podcasts, The Frankie J Experience, Progressive HVAC, and Interstellar Frequency. Who knows what you like, but check it out. And also, if you can, have a listen to the Wisdom app. Again, it's free to download on your phone or tablet. And I'm usually on there Wednesday nights at around 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Or do we say Eastern Daylight Time now? When did that change? I don't know. I don't make these kind of rules. But I'm on there and I'm talking about podcasts and podcasting. And if you want to have a one-on-one chat, you can do that. Just come on and say hello if you want to. That's really cool. It'll be fun to get to speak to the listeners one-on-one and let me know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show, if there's a podcast I should be talking about, what you would like to know about launching a podcast, and all sorts of stuff like that. It's great fun. And even if you don't listen to me, catch some of the other speakers that are on there. A bunch of men and women that are fantastic. Hey, remember our guest, Brandy Singleton, who we had on a while back? She's on there too, my buddy Brandy. Can't forget to mention her. And there are so many other women and fine gentlemen as well. So, if you like this show, you know what you can do for me? Just a small favor. Head on over to Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and if you can, leave a nice review and let people know that they should be checking this podcast out. I would greatly appreciate it. And you can listen to the show right where you are, or you can hear it on any other podcast app, or Sherpalution.com, or a new one called Podopolo, Podopolo. That's one where podcasters get paid. It is absolutely free to you as a listener. And I think as that grows in popularity, you will be able to have more one-on-one conversations with me or other listeners about the show. And it becomes like a social app. So it's cool. You get to listen to a fun podcast, and you get to talk to new people. Can't beat that, right? All right, Mr. Bruce, I think we can head on out of here. And until next time, we will see you, and have a great week. And until next time, you'll be hearing from me soon. So in the meantime, folks, you know what I gotta say. Viva la Sherpalution. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yo, come back now, you hear?